Hey everyone, I'm just going to kick off. We've had a couple of technical issues, but it wouldn't be a Zoom meeting without it, I think, at this stage. So I just have, yeah, that's perfect. I have support there from a couple of colleagues, so hopefully everything will go smoothly after this. So my name is Sarah Jane Henley. I'm the Communications and Campaigns Coordinator with ActionAid Ireland. So I'm just going to do a little bit of an introduction and background to the event. And then I'm going to hand over to our excellent panel. I just want to say thanks so much to everybody who's taken the time during their lunch and otherwise to join. Just a couple of housekeeping. We'll definitely finish within the hour. From about 1:40, we'll open up the floor to Q&A. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat box there. I'd say there will be a lot of questions, a lot of interest. So if we don't get around to it, to answering your question, please do get in touch with us at info@actionaid.org or go to our website, actionaid.ie. There's loads of contact information there, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have. So I'm just going to quickly just give you a little bit of a background. First of all, today is really about getting what we feel are some of the foremost experts, practitioners and campaigners in the field of FGM prevention, both nationally and internationally, to come together and give us their experience around campaigning on this issue, and to give the audience and all of you who've taken the time to join today the tools to be able to get involved, to contribute, to help prevent and tackle this issue on a national and international level. Some background to this event: it's a follow-on kind of continuation of a campaign that we commenced on International Zero Tolerance for FGM Day in February. And part of that campaign was the launch of a public petition where we could generate public awareness and support around the eradication of FGM in Ireland by 2030. And this is coming off some of the work. We in ActionAid work in a partnership capacity in the National Steering Committee around FGM. So we work with a lot of other civil society groups. And part of that group, or the recommendations of that group, is for our government to commit to the creation of a national action plan around FGM. And that is really what our petition is calling for our government to do. So we've just been absolutely blown away by the support from everybody. We started off with a target of 7,341 signatures, and that's reflective of the number of girls in Ireland in 2016 who had survived or were at risk of FGM. And because of the unbelievable support that we got, we continue to roll on the petition. We're now at 10,200 signatories, and we've increased it to 15,000 because we think that this would kind of make our argument and advocacy stronger when it comes to approaching the government, which we have a new government now, and as I'm sure you're all familiar with. So without any kind of further ado, as I said, any questions that you have, we're here to answer them. But I just want to introduce our as I said, our excellent panel. First, we have Triona Pender, who's our head of programs in ActionAid Ireland. So we're really looking forward to hearing her insights from an Irish and international perspective. Then we have Agnes Kola, who is the women's rights, hi Agnes, the National Women's Rights Coordinator with ActionAid Kenya, who are one of our partners. And then finally we have Ifrah Ahmed, who's a founder and activist of the Ifrah Foundation. So it's a wonderful organisation. She's a wonderful person. If you want to have a look her up, there's lots of stuff online there. And then, as I said, we'll wrap it up for Q&A and a bit of discussion. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Triona, if you're ready to go.
Okay, I'm unmuted, am I? Hi. Thanks very much. Delighted to be here as well, especially with Agnes and Ifrah. So I'm just going to start talking a little bit very quickly, I suppose, because we don't have a huge amount of time. But just to talk a bit about the work that ActionAid is doing, specifically in Ireland, on this issue of FGM. We've been working for a number of years as a federation, and we in ActionAid Ireland have an overseas programme, a women's rights programme, that's currently being implemented in Kenya, Nepal and Ethiopia. That's with funding from the Government of Ireland, Irish Aid. So we've always been involved in this type of work as part of our general response to gender-based violence. But in 2016, we actually brought that work to Ireland when we got some funding from the EU to work on the issue of FGM with the migrant communities here in Ireland. So from 2016 to 2018, we worked on a project called AFTER, and AFTER stands for Against FGM Through Empowerment and Rejection. So the point of that work was to really reach out to the migrant population that's living in Ireland, and especially the communities in County Cork. We selected 3 different direct provision centres, and for those of you that maybe are not familiar with direct provision centres, they're centres where migrants who come to Ireland seeking asylum live for often a very long time, a number of years, until their asylum process has been dealt with by the government and they get an answer yes or no. So we worked in 3 different direct provision centres in County Cork with groups of women, groups of men and groups of girls, helping them to understand, first of all, what FGM actually is, because when you speak to children especially, and it's an awful subject to have to speak to children about, but they don't understand what it is. You know, they know that there's going to be a party, they're going to be made a fuss of, they're going to, you know, reach adulthood, but they don't know the physical implications of FGM. So we worked with those groups to raise their awareness. We used our methodology that we were already implementing in various countries. You know, we're part of a big federation that works in 45 countries worldwide. So we were trained ourselves by our colleagues from ActionAid Kenya, Liberia, Somaliland, on how to broach this subject with people in direct provision here in Ireland. Because when you speak about this subject, if it's in the community in Kenya or if it's with a migrant population in Ireland, it's a very taboo subject. So people don't actually want to engage with it, especially men, I suppose, even more so than women. So you have to go through a series of what we call reflection action, and we had 12 workshops with each of those groups, which looked at various different things, like, you know, their control over your own body, various different conversations, doing exercises like a body mapping, getting somebody to lie on the floor and trace the outline of their body, and then to talk about, you know, various parts of their body, and you know, who has control of over your hands and your feet and your eyes and all the rest. And eventually you get to the part around, you know, your sexual organs, and how FGM is a way, I guess, of controlling women and taking control away from women. And we use lots of different tools to get to this level of conversation. But the point is to, I suppose, emphasize to people that massive negative health impacts of FGM. It's got no positive, no medical founding whatsoever. And also then to bring it up as kind of a human rights issues, and help them to understand that it is actually a way of controlling women. There's no need for it, and to help them to reject the practice. So one of the main points we're trying to get across all the time is that it is actually contributing to further poverty in the communities, for example, because once a girl is circumcised, and this is something that's happened to 200 million women across the world, they're already living with circumcision, and there's a further 3 million women and girls at risk every single year of having this happening to them. So as soon as they've been circumcised, which can happen at any age really, but normally it's maybe from about 8 to 12 years old, they get taken out of school, and they're married off. So their education is over at that point. They're into a series of, you know, early pregnancies that are further complicated, not just by their young age, but also, you know, the process of having had FGM done to them, which causes huge complications. So even, you know, if they get through the FGM process, which unfortunately many of them don't, a lot of girls actually bleed and die when it's been done to them. You know, they're into a whole series of other complications. Education is finished, they're into a cycle of poverty, you know, with lots of children and no kind of, I suppose, prospects of income generation or finding a job for themselves or further developing themselves in their communities. So we try to make all that understandable to people, to get their inputs and to get their feelings around why this is happening, because it is a cultural thing. It's nothing to do with religion. It's nothing to do with anything other than, in my view, control of women. But it's very much, you know, it's part of their culture. And you have to understand from their perspective also that they're not doing it for their own good. They're doing it because they want their daughters to be married, and if they're not cut, as to use the colloquial term, if they haven't been cut, then they feel that, or the community feels that the girl is unclean and that she will not be able to find a husband, and that's a major issue for people who don't want to circumcise their children. And there's an example of a woman I met in Kajiado in Kenya when I first started working with ActionAid, and it really brought that point home to me, the pressure that people are under, because her daughter had been part of the ActionAid program in that community, and the teachers and the girls in the school have been trained around FGM and what it is and all the negative implications of it. And we also work with all of the parents, and I'd say a huge percentage of time that actually does work, but there is a small percentage of cases where the parents just don't, or feel that they can't change their minds. So this girl reported that there was a party planned for her, and she felt she was going to be circumcised, and she ran away to an ActionAid rescue centre. And those rescue centres are a kind of a last resort for girls who have no other option, whose parents are not changing or not moving on their perspective around FGM. So she'd been in the school for a fair while, and her parents came to visit her a number of times to try and convince her to come back home and to get married and to go through FGM, and she kept refusing. She said she wanted to study and to become a doctor, and she didn't want to be circumcised. So after maybe about half a dozen times, the parents came back and they said, okay, well, we're going to support you. We're going to give you some funding so you can get some additional books for yourself. We're going to try and pay for some of your school fees. We want to support you in your education. And when we spoke to the parents, they told us that, well, actually, we never really wanted to circumcise our daughter. We were just under huge pressure from our community and from our peers that, if we didn't do it, then she would be rejected and we would be rejected. So the girl herself had much more courage than her parents, but they eventually fell in line and said, well, okay, we're going to support you. So it's quite a complex issue to deal with, and it takes a long, long time to bring about that behaviour change. And one of the things that we would like to do now in Ireland, we've had this, it's called the After Project. So we've had that project for 2 years, up to 2018. We've since had another After Project that we worked again in County Cork in direct provision centres. And we did that in partnership with Akidwa, the first project. So what we now would like to do is to, if we can get more resources, is to bring aspects of our work in the Women's Rights Programme, which looks at behaviour change, which is looking at kind of really analysing behaviours, and it's a kind of a technical approach. We have colleagues in University College London who help us to do this, but it's really trying to analyse behaviours and discover the motivations behind behaviours, and then to design interventions that are more kind of like accurately targeting behaviour change. So, this is something, I suppose, that within Ireland at the moment, we think the work on FGM is massively underfunded. We're part of the National Steering Committee on FGM, and the National Steering Committee has done a really excellent job in advocating to get more resources for the issue of FGM, to train our police, to train our health staff. When a child is presented, or someone is presents with FGM to a clinic, to a normal hospital or a normal GP, they don't understand it. A lot of them haven't seen it, a lot of them haven't heard of it. FGM is illegal in Ireland, and it's illegal to take your daughter abroad for FGM, but the police often don't understand the process of FGM either. So there's a huge need for training. The Irish Family Planning Association and Akidwa are fantastic with their outreach services, but I think it's not enough, because at the moment everything is kind of concentrated in Dublin, and we're trying to bring these outreach services, and we have the projects in County Cork, but there's migrants living all over the country, and we really need to be resourced properly to take all of those people into the programme and to help them all. So what we've been doing as part of the National Steering Committee on FGM is advocating for a national action plan, and that would include government, and we've met with government, various ministers as part of that committee a few times now, and we actually met with a group of politicians and MEPs in advance of the last elections in February, to ask government to form kind of a multi-party committee that would have representatives from the Department of Health, the Department of Justice, Social Services, also civil society groups like ourselves, the KIDWA, IFPA, members of the FGM steering committee, and members of the migrant community that can really kind of develop and steer and implement. And we also need resources to bring about this national action plan that can address the issue properly and fully in Ireland. I think I'm probably a little bit over time now, so I might just leave it there. And yeah, I'm happy to take questions at the end. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Triona. That's really good. I'm going to pass you on to Agnes. If you're ready to go, Agnes, and unmute you there. Good to go.
Yeah. Thanks, Triona and Sarah. From the perspective of ActionAid Kenya, we have had anti-FGM programming and advocacy work for quite a number of years. And we work in 8 counties in Kenya. There have 22 FGM practicing counties. ActionAid works in 8 of these 22. What drives us, or what is the underpinning issue, is that we believe that FGM is a violation of the rights of women and girls, and we therefore have to strongly reject FGM in our programming because it has a strong link to the development of girls to issues around their bodily integrity, issues around accessing the right kind of education, issues around even accessing the right kind of spaces that they require for their well-being, even when they become women. In Kenya, the prevalence of FGM is 21%. That's the national prevalence. But I just want to mention that this can be quite misleading because in areas of our work, like in Garissa, Isiolo, we have a very high prevalence of close to 100%. So much as the country, the national average is 21%, we have pockets that are almost 100% FGM. So we deal with each area depending on the context and the issues and how it presents, because FGM is also driven or practiced in different ways across, it's not standard. So there are areas where you would find that they do infant FGM on young children who are barely a week old. There are areas where they do FGM after 2 years, so it's seasonal, or sometimes they do it relating to the periods of harvesting and when they have plenty of food and water. So our programming has been very contextual in the sense that it recognizes the differences between all these counties. What we've been able to do, we've been able to achieve a lot in terms of preventing FGM from happening, but also having a strong response plan in case it happens, and we are still able to sort of help girls to access justice. So we have strongly provided and linked to the government structures to give medical, legal, and psychosocial support as required. We have also directly worked with girls to provide safe spaces. The safe spaces are critical because this is where the girls can be able to get information, they can share as peers, but at the same time, they can also seek refuge. There are few areas where we have safe houses, and the safe houses keep girls during the periods of FGM, so that when they are most at risk, they have a place where they can run to, they can be taken care of, and there is a plan to reintegrate them back into the community when the FGM season is over. Across all the areas where we work, we have women's networks and movements that are quite key, because that is the link between the girl and the government and a lot of the actors that provide the services that the girls need. So it's been a vehicle and an avenue that we have worked with to be able to provide the right kind of information and also the right kind of access, whether we are talking about access to sexual and reproductive health services, or all the services that the girls want. In our programming, we also work with men and boys, and this is driven by the fact that we have realized that in some of these communities, religious, cultural leaders, young men hold a very high stake in what happens to the lives of the girls. So they have been critical in leading processes, and we have good stories where some religious leaders have been at the forefront of challenging FGM, and it has helped us to be able to reach out to the parents, to reach out to the general community, and also to reach out to the girls. We have established what we are calling the SMS platform, and it's a portal that somebody can be able to report any incident of FGM, but at the same time, they also receive information through that platform. The platform also gives us good data that we can use to monitor the trends around FGM and also link up with the government agents and provide information that they need for planning, for being able to allocate budgets, and prioritizing FGM as an issue. One other thing that I can mention that we've done, last year we formed the East Africa End FGM Network, and it's a network of actors who are working around FGM in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. We will add on Ethiopia and Somaliland, hopefully. We would have done it this year if it were not for COVID, but hopefully we'll be able to get them on board next year, because what we feel is that it's good to have a strong network to be able to share and to have cross-learning, but also to be able to tackle some issues around cross-border FGM and things that are a reality that may require intervention beyond the Kenyan borders. So in terms of a few challenges that we are facing in our work, we still see medicalization of FGM. In some of the counties, there are medical practitioners who carry out FGM. So the girls would go into the medical facility, you know, with any other illness or not even with an illness, but they would carry it out. So it's an issue that the government has picked on, and there's serious crackdown around it because it's illegal and it's a practice that cannot be accepted in any form. The cross-border issue is still a big issue, because so long as the countries that surround Kenya do not have the same kind of policy, environment, or space to be able to challenge or end FGM, then we still have a problem, because it means, because our borders are porous, girls can still be taken into the communities that are, you know, in the next area, and they undergo FGM and they come back. The other challenge that we are seeing is still around enforcement of the law. Law enforcement is still a bit weak in the country. Yes, there has been a huge response in the last year or so. President has announced that he would want to end FGM by 2022, which is a tall order, but at least that gives us the kind of environment that can help us engage with the government to be able to work around the issues of ending FGM. Community belief systems and structures still very strong. People still hold FGM as very dear to them. And one of the projects that has helped us to be able to work around this is the work that we are doing with ActionAid Ireland, and it's speaking to behavior and cultural change of these communities. So that's very key, because if somebody does not believe in something, then they cannot do it. So we are attempting not just to use the law as an approach to ending FGM, but to be able to tackle these issues from a personal perspective and a value perspective based on what people value. Since the onset of COVID, we have seen a bit of regression around issues of FGM, and it has to do with the restrictions that are in place, because right now we have less engagement with the girls. The girls are not in school, so that puts them at a higher risk of undergoing FGM. The social and support structures that they had when they were in school, we have girls forums in school that every week is able to support them. That has been broken down, and even other support structures like the teachers and other community-based organizations can no longer operate as required. So what we have seen is that because this safe space is lacking, in some of the counties, like in West Pokot, we've seen an upsurge in FGM, where there's mass FGM going on. The last few weeks, ActionAid has worked with the Anti-FGM Board and a few other actors to be able to crack down on the cases of FGM that are going on. About 500 girls underwent FGM since the time that COVID got into Kenya, somewhere around mid-March. So it's quite a big crisis. But the good thing is that there are chiefs who have been interdicted who are aiding FGM. There are circumcisers who've been arrested, and some parents who have also been arrested, and girls have been rescued and taken to safe areas where they can be able to get help and support. So that's where we are, but we are also looking at mechanisms. We are working through other means to still continue and reach the girls. Like we have a lot of phone mentorship sessions that are taking place. We are using the radio as an avenue to be able to still continue passing the messages and engaging with communities. So that's where we are as a country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Agnes. That was really, really informative. That you're really brilliant work that you're doing. So I'm just going to remind everyone that we have a Q&A at the end. So if there's any questions that come to mind and you'd like any of our panelists to answer them, please put them in the chat box and we'll get to them. Feel free to ask whatever comes to mind. And we have, it looks like we still have about 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the event anyway, even though we had a bit of a late start. And just to once again introduce Ifrah Ahmed. She just had a couple of issues with registering there at the beginning. So it's lovely to have you, Ifrah, and look forward to hearing you. So if we got you there, yeah, I think we have her there. Yeah.
Sorry, you're right. I have a issue of registering, but here I am now. I really thank you so much for inviting for Ifrah Foundation and myself to be speaker. I see a group of people that who are interested to hear on FGM and related the issue of FGM, and that shows how people care about the cause of the female genital mutilation. I'm Ifrah. Those people who doesn't know me, I am fond of Ifrah Foundation. I started the campaign practice on female genital mutilation here in Ireland, and I moved to Somalia. When I started the campaign myself, it was my personal experience, which I don't really want to go through deeply, but to give you some views of how Ireland was feeling about the issue of FGM. I started because the knowledge of the doctors and medical people on FGM, I felt that there is something need to be done, and I felt that I have to be the first, or maybe I have to be the other person to speak out, because I was living with other refugee women who are from different countries in Africa, but none of them wanted to speak out. And going through a medical was very difficult, so I take the lead and I say I'm going to speak out. I was so lucky to actually work with a lot of young people who have been thrown the practice and fighting with them through the government, and fighting FGM to be legislated in Ireland, which was act on the legislation in 2012. And that made me so proud to approach in European level and become the voice of Ireland, and bringing my voice into EU level and speaking out how important it is the EU to actually have a one voice ending FGM. And that gave me opportunity to say that if I'm living in European country and I was given a voice in Ireland, I could take this voice back to Somalia, where I'm originally from. And when I get my Irish passport, I went back to Somalia first time. And that time, Ifrah Foundation was not even a charity organization, but it was young people who came together. But first time when I went to Somalia, I seen how practice was still relevant in the community, because it was normal to practice and nobody was speaking out against it, because it's just traditional and cultural. So first time when I went, I came back to Ireland and I felt that there is something I need to do. I meet with amazing people, Sami Leslie and Mary Mugagian, who did a movie called A Girl from Mogadishu about my story. And when I meet them, I started setting up Ifrah Foundation, where now Ifrah Foundation has a three mission of FGM awareness and also legislation, and then the media. So what have we done since I moved back to Somalia as a fund of Ifrah Foundation? We have worked with the federal government of Somalia in terms of bringing legislation of FGM. That has never been success, because Somalia has been a war over 30 years, and it's been very difficult to convince the government they have to form a kind of legislation to ban FGM. But still, that nothing stopped me. I continue working in Somalia and fighting the practice. So over the years when I was there and fighting, I have witnessed a lot of different issues of FGM. I have seen mothers who lost their 15 years old girl who died for bleeding when she was having a baby. I have met with the young girls who I even brought in hospital who was having a kidney failure, but the time I received them in a medical support, it was already too late because the two kidney has failed. So the girls have died. I have witnessed that young girls who have died for bleeding during the cut. We saw lucky back in 2018, there was a story of a young girl called a Deka. Deka story became an international story, not only Somalian. Deka has died because of female genital mutilation. And the reason we knew Deka's story was Ifrah Foundation works with global media campaign. We do a lot of media to raise awareness. So what GMC do is that we educate the religious leaders and the media, because I think it's very important to have a media on board. Otherwise, nobody will actually bring your voice out. And it was very difficult, even the Somali journalists, to be on top of the issue, because it's a cultural practice and it's a normal for them. So there was no point there to raise awareness. And not only that, also, there was a lot of sexual violence with the young girls who've been subjected, rape, and also child marriage and all sort of things. So we were so lucky finding religious leaders who were liberal and who were interested to talk about female genital mutilation, and journalists. So for me, picking Deka's story is that Deka's story became international story. And that was only one story that international media has attracted to it. But the story was by one of our journalists who we train in Somalia as a global media campaign and Ifrah Foundation. And that actually helped to say that, you know, how many girls can we save now? In terms of practice, during Deka's death, we saved 7 girls from cutting. We saved 7 girls from bleeding. We heard the story and we take them to hospital, and they were actually safe, at least to find in hospital where they can receive blood transfusion and, you know, all the medical support they need. Plus, we saved 20 girls not to be cut during that time. So now, if I talk about the challenge we are facing on female genital mutilation in Somalia, is that because of the COVID-19, has actually held back a lot of works and also a lot of humanitarian to be in the field to do some work. So young girls become central and risks of FGM because the Holy Quran has been closed during the 3 months of, you know, hard time of COVID-19, and family found it very easy during this time to cut the girls. So, and also, not only that, because of the cutting, but the other issue is that, which we have been raising awareness through our young people who are now in Somalia. I'm in Ireland, by the way, but we have a team who are working in Somalia. So the more danger we have seen it and we have witnessed was that when the family cut their daughters and the daughter is bleeding, there is no hospital will accept the child. Because of the coronavirus, they were scared to take the child in hospital. And that also put us in a position where we say that how can we actually go into rural area, especially IDBs, and raise awareness. So that was the biggest challenge, but it's still Ifrah Foundation and GMC, we have come up with a plan actually using TV and radios and raising awareness. So what we are doing now is that using the journalists and bringing the awareness and speaking to everyone and saying that FGM should not be practiced. At the moment, we are working on, because Somalia, it's actually 5 regions and it's 5 different regions. And now we are working with all these 5 regions, and we are producing short dramas about FGM. And there was a time in Somalia, FGM is, nobody would speak out. But now, because I break the silence, I break the cycle, and I speak out, and I've been on TV talking about GBV and, female genital mutilation. Now people willing to speak out. So now what we are using is that a Somali well-known actors to act some small dramas, how to stop FGM, or, how family planning to practice on FGM. So the issue is that there is no legislation in Somalia, and that is our biggest challenge. And Agnes actually mentioned that when the president of Kenya, he said in he was in Canada, I was at the meeting when he mentioned and said that 2020 I will end the FGM. And for me, I keep saying that I wish he could bring all African leaders together and fight for the issue together, because Kenya, they are a member of IGAD, and Somalia also, they are a member of IGAD. So I think there is the opportunity here where we can say that, you know, bringing all the IGAD state members and, you know, having a meeting together and come up with a plan, because, you know, we don't need every day the international community to speak out the issue that we are facing in Somalia or other countries. Our leaders, they should wake up and should do something. So thank you for mentioning about the promise he made it in Vancouver. But the issue we have in Somalia is that our leaders, they actually, when they come on the power, they are very good and they want to make a difference. But when they are in the power, nothing is happening. I would say that a little bit is similar to Irish politicians, but you know, at least when you go and lobby with Irish politicians, they make the promises. And when they make the promises, if you go on public, they will actually make a difference. But those African leaders, they wouldn't care actually, more or less. So that's the issue we have in Africa. So the legislation is there, but now this time, the moment we have a COVID-19 is basically opportunity for the cutters, opportunity for the mothers, opportunity for everybody. You know, that child is at risk. It is our hand to protect them and save them. Even I am at home in, you know, in Dublin, but I am in Somalia every day on the phone, making difference with those young girls who are cut, and we are working hard really to make a difference. So, you know, we are all here interest of ending FGM. How can we make sure that, you know, whether it's Somalia, whether it's Kenya, whether it's any other African countries, whether in Ireland, because we know there was a case that actually brought it into justice. But do we really wanted even Ireland it to happen again? Because, you know, now we have a legislation, but is that legislation actually doing the work? I don't want it tomorrow another girl to be cut and then they say that, you know, it was brought into justice. I don't want that. I want the girls to have a life, because she was born and raised in Ireland, and she should be having her life together. And I think now, because I'm in Ireland, there is some work we can do, lobbying with our new government, though even there are some old government as well, but how can we make a difference into that, bring in ActionAid, they're a member of the steering committee, and, you know, other steering committee, I'm sure they are here. How can we make a difference in this level that we don't have to face it, what we had last year, young girls who was cut in this country. So I'm so happy taking this opportunity to ask you all the questions, and I see Siobhan is there as well. So how can we actually make it a difference in this without having an issue cutting the girls? Do we have to find a country where it's more developed and we have legislation and we have everything to fight, or we have to stress on country like Somalia, like Kenya, where the issue is a highly relevant to practice on FGM? I really thank you so much for inviting me here, and I'm happy to take questions and anything you ask me. And I would like to say my colleague Leonie also, I see her, she's on the panel as well, and she can pop in to answer any other questions. I thank you so much for inviting me, and yeah, I stop there.
Thank you so much, Ifrah. That's really brilliant. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your contribution. So basically, we said now what we'll do is we'll accept questions in through the chat box, and we can have a discussion around them. So I see we've one in here from Deirdre McDermott, and she said, Ifrah, can you raise this through the UN SDGs? There is a women's group that might be a good focus to disseminating this more widely. And I think it's McKenna's point is quite similar. This is an excellent point on the working on serious regional advocacy with IGAD, EU, EAC, and I also think we should see how EU and West Africa block. So yeah, I think it was mostly the point around how we can kind of work together on a much kind of wider, higher international level, which I think is a really good point actually. The issues are just so common, but I suppose nationally they're quite different in terms of what's needed for change. So does anyone have anything they'd like to address in those points.
And I think, you know, the good thing is that Ifrah Foundation, we are working with UNFPA. And if you're in Ireland or around other countries, you have seen the UNFPA population report. This year it was featured one of my stories, which is really good. And I see that United Nations now, they're kind of picking FGM as itself, because it takes a long time, United Nations, to understand the FGM, its issue. Because if you look at African country, FGM goes under gender-based violence for United Nations. But now I can see that UN agencies are much interested in taking FGM itself and speaking out. And now to say that I become a high-profile supporter for UNHCR, which actually it gives me more opportunity even to go to UN headquarters, you know, addressing with high-profile people on the issue of women in IDBs or refugees, and includes, of course, my work on female genital mutilation. So there is now a UN agency sees FGM as issue. It's just how can we actually pack all this up and put it in a place and make it in one?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ifrah. There's a couple of questions coming in here around kind of, I suppose our goal of this meeting was to, you know, people who are interested, how can they get involved? How can they help? So there's one question here from Sharon Curley. Is there any age appropriate programs for schools to raise awareness on the issue? And what can we do differently to keep FGM on the international agenda? Sorry, that's kind of separate. How can we as volunteers support this cause in Ireland? So would anyone, I wonder, is Triona there, or Ifrah or Agnes, if you have any thoughts on that, what we can do?
Is that within Ireland, or it means in Africa as well?
Well, the question around awareness programs, age appropriate awareness programs in schools, is just a general question. It's not in relation to a particular country. It's a good idea.
I think everybody can get involved. Everyone can get involved, supporting ActionAid, supporting Ifrah Foundation, and finding, you know, whatever program they like to do, because, you know, that is how we make it different. And always I take example as the Tesco says, every little helps. Whatever people does, they time posting on social media or contributing whatever they can, it makes difference to all of us doing our work, I guess.
Yeah. Sharon just said Ireland, yeah. I don't think, unless, I don't know if we have a programme like that in ActionAid Ireland where we go to schools and increase awareness amongst student populations, but it's a good point, really good, because as you made that point a lot, Ifrah, about the impact of young people and their campaigning in the beginning for you, so definitely something we should look at. We have another question here for Agnes. It's just, have you seen a rise in girls accessing the safe houses since COVID-19 restrictions?
Yes, the COVID-19 restrictions brought in dynamics that were quite unique. And one of the dynamics that was there is that because schools are being closed, depending on how, you know, the safe house or rescue center was viewed, there are some areas where it was also viewed as a school, and especially if it was linked within the school system. So there are instances where even safe houses and rescue centers were closed. But we had an intervention with other actors who also work in the field. And right now, most of them are open. There are some that are still closed, so girls can be able to access the service. The challenge that is also there is that most of these safe houses are owned or they are run by either NGOs or faith-based organizations. So there's a push and there's a campaign around having the government to support shelters, because when the government has prioritized it and put allocations for budgets, they're also able to give oversight in terms of how safe are girls within those spaces, because we've seen instances where some of these places that are supposed to be safe are really not safe. So it's about ensuring that the girl does not move, you know, jump from the frying pan into the fire, but ensuring that the girl is able to get the right kind of support that she requires. So yes, girls can be able to access the service, and we are pushing to ensure that the government gives more more strength towards the safe houses. Just to mention something small on the age-appropriate programs, one of the things that has really helped us as ActionAid Kenya is that we have a girls forum facilitation manual that speaks to girls all the way from age 8 to 19. Within that manual, it gives age-appropriate educational modules that we take the girls through every year. So that's something that has helped because it builds the girls from one level to the next, even until they become young adults and they're able to fend for themselves. So it's something that can be adapted and can be used in whatever context. Thank you.
Great. There's just another question here from Sian Kelly. How can we do more in Ireland to provide community supports to migrant, sorry, this keeps popping up, so this keeps going on my screen, to migrant mothers who feel especially socially isolated during lockdowns and who may be at risk from FGM from families and abroad? I suppose that's that's relatable on a national and international context. Would anyone like to speak to that?
I can have a go if you want to. I've been unmuted now again. Thank you. Yeah, it's a really important question actually, and it's something that, you know, we had our project, which is kind of only for a defined kind of period of time, and I think this is where organisations that are kind of working full time with these migrant community groups, like Akidra and others, you know, that they would have kind of systems, etc., set up, I suppose, for people to be able to be in contact with them. I see one thing that, you know, who are based in Ireland, at least, there are systems that were set up, you know, during the COVID response for people to be able to contact with, you know, Gardaí or with other groups around domestic violence, gender-based violence, and there is also the travel restrictions didn't apply to people who are trying to flee from any kind of domestic violence situation. So at least I suppose if they're in a migrant situation in Ireland, they have those services available to them, same as anybody else. So I guess part of the role of like civil society groups who are then working with migrants is to make sure that that messaging is available to them. One of the things that the group in Cork asked us to do after the last project, when we sat with them and we asked them, you know, would there be anything that they would like to improve or any further work they wanted to continue with us? And they said that really they wanted to have a workshop around kind of well-being and mental health well-being, because of their situation in direct provision. So, and which we're now organising for them. It's been postponed because of COVID, but it will happen in the near future. But I think, you know, really when you're in direct provision, you have so many, and not just direct provision. I suppose you're in the community. There's also people living in the community from, you know, other migrant populations across Africa and different countries in Ireland. You know, you can feel quite isolated sometimes because you're within your own community, and trying to protect your culture a lot becomes more important almost when you're not in your own country. So it's really important to have those links and to make sure that people have access to information around this time.
Thanks so much, Triona. I'm sorry, that was probably me. I had you on mute there. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I dropped off.
So we're just getting loads of really nice comments in, but I just think we're coming a bit close to 2 o'clock to be taking any more questions. So what I'm going to do is myself and my colleague Julianne will compile the questions and we'll try our best to get back to everybody. We're also on all the social media, so ActionAid Ireland on Twitter and Facebook, and our website as well, ActionAid.ie. So we're here to engage and we want to hear from you. But I just want to say personally, thanks so much to everyone who's attended and everyone who's signed a petition. And I'm going to hand over to Triona just to say a few closing words on the event. Thanks everyone.
Yeah. No, just to say a big thank you to everyone. I mean, we're absolutely overwhelmed with the support for the petition, and we'd ask everyone to keep signing it, to keep sharing it with your friends. I mean, I think the one thing, like, we need to, as Ifrah was saying, we need to continue to constantly build awareness around this, and especially with our governments, you know, to make sure that there are services there for people who are in danger of having FGM done to them, or who are, you know, thinking about of being pressured into doing it to their own children. So it's so important that, you know, whenever you meet your local representative, albeit about, you know, maybe your road, getting your road fixed, you know, throw in the question, what's happening with FGM? Is that steering committee going to happen? Are we going to have a national action plan? We need to constantly kind of keep it on the radar, because it is such an awful human rights violation for women and girls, and this work is just so important. So just want to say huge thanks to my colleague Aggie and to Ifrah as well for sharing today. And I think we need to keep talking about it, we need to keep sharing, and we need to have support so that we can fully eradicate this sooner rather than later. So thank you. Sorry, the one last thing I would say was thank you as well, not just for your support around the campaign, etc., but for, you know, generally all your support to ActionAid Ireland, whether it's in monetary terms or it's in, you know, campaigning terms or voluntary. I know people have had various different levels of involvement with ActionAid Ireland and others, parts of our federation as well, you know, ActionAid Kenya, who are benefiting from our programs in Ireland too. So it's just so important for us to have your support. You know, that's what keeps us going, and also the support of Irish Aid. So thank you all very much.
Great. Thanks everyone. I'll end it there.
Thank you.